So, welcome everyone as you come online right now, and as we gather tonight to look at the actor's process, well-being from rehearsal to performance. And I'm just going to step out of that slide now, which is not letting me do. There we go. Right. So I'm Dr. Mark Seaton, and I'm happy to co-host this session tonight with Simon Ward. Welcome to you, Simon, and we will shortly be welcoming our guest panelists. But I'd like to begin by acknowledging where I'm coming from this evening, from the land of the Baramategal clan of the Darug Nation. And I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and also extend that welcome to all of you and whichever parts of Australia you may be tuning in from this evening. So I'm going to begin by saying this is the fourth of our series of 5 webinars on different aspects of actors' health and well-being. We're delighted that this is being hosted and supported by the Australian Society for Performing Arts Healthcare and Equity Foundation. And all of these sessions are being recorded, in case you're wondering and you can only stay on for a short time. All the sessions are being recorded and will become available free access on the ASPA website. And so you'll find that in a few weeks' time, this session will be available from that. I'd like to preface tonight's conversation, and then I'll be handing over to Simon to introduce our panelists, that, you know, the craft of acting is very much premised about what works in order to achieve a particular result. And as I particularly understand it, making a connection with some kind of audience, either live or through a screen. And over the centuries, more recently, actors and directors have played with various what I call technologies of the body, recognizing these are things that we actually do with and to each other to make for what may be seeming to be efficient outcomes of actors in creating performance. But that's what we're going to be exploring tonight, is from rehearsal through to the curtain opening or the film being shot and then being edited and screened. What's it like to be an actor in those kinds of experiences? So I'm going to now hand over to Simon to introduce our panelists for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Mark. Good evening and welcome to you all. Is this a dagger I see before me? No, it's an ASPA panel, which means it's even more successful and won't lead to a lot of cleaning up afterwards. With us are 3 very, very special guests who have contributed a lot individually and collectively to the world of acting and support and study and development and research, and are very, very active in so many areas. Let me tell you about a few of them. Alan Powell from the UK. Alan's research in his actor care practice, note the QR code, was initially driven by the question, why do some actors struggle to be emotionally authentic? There it is, in performance. After more than 16 years directing actors in trauma-based educational narratives and 6 years of training in various therapeutic modalities, he developed ACEs, actualizing characters by expanding self-awareness, a trauma-informed model inspired by the therapeutic spiral model psychodrama that supports authentic expression by prioritizing resilience prior to accessing vulnerabilities. ACEs has been presented internationally at the International Association of Group Psychotherapy and Group Processes, Musicians and Performing Artists Health and Performance in Norway, with ASPA, with the Association for Theatre in Higher Education, the Stanislavski Research Centre in the UK, and the Association of Acting Coaches and Educators in Canada. ACES has formed part of the resilience research at Rose Bruford College in collaboration with London Southwark University in England. Our next guest, Dr. Susie Germain from Australia, is an actor, trainer, and researcher specializing in psychological realism-based character transformation. Susie nurtures acting expertise by diffusing enmeshments with the make-believe and personal. In 2016, she received the Philip Parsons Prize from the Australasian Association for Theatre, Drama and Performance Studies for her practice-led project, Faking It for Real, an examination of the autobiographical self in character creation. Well worth having a look at that research, incidentally, after this. In the 3-decade-long career, Susie has performed with the National Theatre of Scotland, BBC, Traverse Theatre, The Archers, the Performance Space, La Mama, and worked with the Melbourne Theatre Company, the Victorian College of the Arts, Melbourne University, NIDA, Monash University as well. She's presented at AUSACT and Performance Studies International and is a published scholar. In 2023, Susie founded the Chekhov Studios in Australia, dedicated to training in the Michael Chekhov technique, innovative practice, and actor well-being. Welcome, Dr. Susie. Fiona Gentle teaches movement, story, and academic skills and has worked professionally for more than 2 decades as a performer, puppeteer, movement director, writer, and director. She has performed with theatre, film, and television companies such as the Sydney Theatre Company, Theatre of Image, Opera Australia, the ABC, BBC, Sesame Street, Jim Henson Company, Nickelodeon, and Kennedy Miller Productions. Fiona has performed many loved characters, including Ferdinand, the duck, from the Babe films. And I'm not sure whether that's the thing you're most known for or most famous for, but I hope you had to sign autographs for that. That's fantastic. And for the last 8 years, she has assisted David Rodman in performing Cookie Monster on his Australian tours. She has directed a number of theatre productions, written for theatre and children's television, and is an ongoing puppetry consultant for television shows and commercials. She has been a specialist drama teacher from preschool to higher education and beyond, and in a range of community and Indigenous arts projects. She has presented at conferences and forums on both student success and creativity. And we are very thrilled and fortunate to have you in between multiple gigs. So thank you so much for joining us, Fiona. Well, welcome. I'm just going to throw it back to Dr. Mark. Dr. Mark, when you were doing your preamble there, and you wrote the brief for this panel, what do you mean by technologies of the body, post-traumatic stress, and effective acting?
Okay, Simon, I will be very brief so we can hear from the other 3 panelists. But just as I already mentioned, technologies of the body, this idea that we shape and are shaped as bodies in interaction with each other. So for actors, human beings, how do they shape and are shaped by each other, particularly in the process of formation as actors? The idea of post-dramatic was a term, post-traumatic dramatic stress was my provocation back in 2006, where I was aware, as my colleagues here are, of actors who have trouble debriefing, letting go, and sometimes experiencing a quality of trauma that really belongs with the character and not with them. And very few people seem to be talking about it. So as a provocation, I evoked this idea of post-dramatic stress rather than post-traumatic stress, just to acknowledge actors, some actors do experience this as a challenge. And so I think in the area of the actor's process, this is an important area of investigation. And then the idea of what does it mean to be an effective actor? I'm understanding effective as achieving some sort of outcome. So what is the expectation of the actor? What kind of outcomes are they looking for? What is an audience looking for? What are those who are employing them looking for? So it could cover that range of things, but I'll hand it back to you now to take us forward.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mark, that's helpful. If people have questions for Mark regarding those points, feel free to put them in the chat and we shall get to them hopefully at the end. So to the panel, our opening question, how do you understand the process of acting from rehearsal to performance, when the doing of it goes from the theoretical to the practical? I wonder who would like to start? Dr. Susie.
So just let me rephrase the question. So you're asking what the process is, or how do I see the process from going from
How do
rehearsal?
you see the process of acting or effective acting from rehearsal to performance or in performance?
Okay. Okay. Yep, I got you. I got you. So there's a number of things that come up around this term effective acting and all of the different sort of like it's got a lot of things attached to it. So stuff with like Mark said, with audience, what's effective acting with audience or for the audience? What is it for your agent? What is it for the casting process? What is it in relationship with the script? What is it in relationship with the other actors that you're involved with? What is it with the director? So it's really big for one just little word. So I think I need to go there first. Like I need to address what, just kind of narrow it down a little bit to answer the question. So for me, effective acting from the rehearsal process to say the opening of the show or when the film is wrapped or the series is wrapped would be doing the actual work, whatever that is, and maintaining and sustaining those relationships with the people that I'm working with. So I'll put myself in the first person in this, and being able to deactivate whatever it is that I've activated in terms of character and be very clear about the relationships that I have with people that I'm working with and the relationships that I have with the text and the relationship that I have with the character, which to me, as an actor myself, but also as a practice-based researcher, one of the most primary things that I'm still investigating is that intimacy that happens between an actor and the character. So I think that effective acting has to basically encompass all of those things, but there's a certain sense of consciousness and mindfulness that everything that I do and everything that is being done in order to be effective has to be by choice, it has to be conscious, it has to be awake, it has to be aware and direct. Anything that I'm doing needs to be uh, sustainable, is the big word, and whatever that means for me. So also being an effective actor or being in relationship with effective acting also means that I need to understand what that is for me, because what's effective for me as an actor may not be effective for someone else. So yeah, that's the start.
Great. What a start. Yes, thank you. That's fascinating. Thank you very much. Fiona.
I think what she said, absolutely. Thanks, Susie.
Thanks, Fiona.
Um,
Appreciate you.
it's such a matrix, as you mentioned, in terms of acting. I don't know if you can start at one point, because whatever point you start at has already started. You know, when you had the first inspiration to be an actor, when you first started training, when you know, every rehearsal, every project that comes along, you're starting again, and yet you're starting the same process. It's all new, they're new people, and yet it's the same sort of internal process, but something might be going on in your life to make it different for you. Something might be triggering for you, the content or someone you've worked before. What, you know, it's such a kind of layered matrix. It's very hard for me anyway to feel like I could start at one point in particular. But if I look at again, I'll probably put myself into that space. It's probably the easiest space to put it in. What I think one of the biggest questions for me, and I speak also into being a teacher as well, that I recognize my students, is this idea of boundaries. And the reason why I mentioned protective layers before is that what's really tricky to juggle as an actor is to be both boundaried and necessarily open and vulnerable at the same time. And I think just as humans in general, we struggle to sort of see how can we create a boundary that is soft enough for us to be vulnerable and open and receiving of inspiration, and not be too armored, and yet also be protective so that our artist is held, the space is held for our artist to sort of safely play. And I think that's the parallel for me with an actor is the health and well-being of the actor side of it is about that sort of creating those healthy boundaries so that the artist in a rehearsal space can play freely with the people around them, with the content, with the even with the audiences, and also, you know, just with what's happening in the process of that rehearsal space. So I think for me, at the beginning of a rehearsal space and the process through that is trying to navigate for myself the space around my artist to make sure that those boundaries are in place so that the artist can sort of unfold, if you like, and reach out safely to their audience, to their fellow players, to their directors. That's what I would say.
Okay, that's fantastic. To boundaries to be able to unfold safely. It's beautiful. Alan.
Hi. Thank you for having me. I'm gonna go back to the original question, because that's kind of the thing that I kind of focused on, and the idea of what's the function of effective acting. And for me, I was looking at it from the perspective of the audience and why do they want to be entertained. And I've always found for myself it was about challenging my own perspective. It's about being a change agent as an actor. It's about, it can be about healing, helping to heal, guidance, as an audience member to live vicariously through the actor, to educate, whether that be history, biopic, to comfort, support, inspire, all these wonderful things when you sit alone in a darkened theater, or whether it be stage or screen, and coming out of that space and feeling either very disturbed about what you just saw, which challenges perspective and you makes you think about your own life, make you think about change. It makes me think about what not to do, or what, as well as not what to potentially what to do. I guess it depends on the content of the story. So all those things, as from an audience perspective, if those are the things that I want to walk away with in any given show, then the purpose of the actor and to make it effective is to be genuine, real, to a place where it resonates with them, the actor, because I've always believed that your truth keeps truth in the world, or my truth keeps truth in the world. So if I can be truthful with myself in a performance and affect the audience, then that to me is the effective acting. That's the function.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Yes, truth to affect and change and see that effect on the audience. Thank you. So some things about boundaries, some things about play, some things about connection, things about being open and getting there safely, and to be genuine. What helps a person work as an effective actor, do you think, in performance? And conversely, what might hinder a person from working as an effective actor? So what might help, what might hinder? Going back to our order before. Dr.
Yeah,
Susie.
I want to jump onto what Alan started to say. I think so a lot of my work has been around understanding what authenticity is in acting, and is it a thing? And in my master's, I discovered that authentic acting is an oxymoron. It doesn't exist, because authenticity in acting clash. Can't be authentic and act, but then what is authentic acting? So I feel like I want to just speak to this idea that within the actor there's like a self, and I'm starting to work with D.W. Winnicott's work about true self and false self in order to be able to find who is the actor, who is this actor in the space, like who is that person that's coming into the space, not the personality, not the person who's got all this lived experience and self and, you know, whatever they had for breakfast and what they like to watch on TV and stuff, which could be relevant later on, like we're not, but that's not the conversation that we're having. So who is it that's coming into the space? Who is it that's coming into rehearsal in terms of them as an actor? And I feel like there's very little work being done in that space to find out what is that being that comes in and how are they authentic in that space. And I think that when we start to nurture that idea, when we start to nurture, and I'm noticing this when I'm coaching actors, when I nurture who they are as they're working, not personal stories and autobiographical material, but just who they are as they're working and things that they're touching into, either in an emotional state or feeling-based state. So Michael Chekhov sees emotions and feelings as being different things, or a psychological state, or all of those things together. If I nurture them and get them to move towards elements of their humanity, we start to touch into what authenticity could be. And the more that I sort of coach actors into moving towards their humanity rather than their autobiographical experience, that's a really big word to say, isn't it? Especially several times. Just going to flag that up. You know, so is to, and Chekhov very much believes in that. And that's what I find so liberating about Michael Chekhov's technique. And also what I found in my own work is the more that I move towards my imagination and my humanity and the humanness of my being, the more I'm able to create and the more I'm able to share that with other actors. And so they find these wonderful, or I'm creating these stepping stones towards an understanding of what authenticity could be. And I find that when they're springboarding from authenticity into creating character, it's so joyful and it's liberating. And there's often quite a few shocked looks that acting could be something that is really open and free and available and rich and panoramic rather than limited experience and trying to dig up your own sort of stuff to try and figure out what this character's like and, you know, getting in your head and stuff like that. So I think there's a level, I think authenticity and finding that authenticity in that particular actor and in acting itself, which I'm still finding it very slippery. It really is. But I think when someone tries to act and they try to figure out what acting is, and they're doing it from the perception of acting, and they're doing it from, and I'm going to say the big C word, sorry to everybody who's watching, when they're trying to do it from celebrity and the popularity of acting as a craft, which we're now sitting in the Western world, and I'm just going to speak to that. When they're trying to do it from those sorts of points of view and, you know, maybe doing it for other reasons other than to practice the craft and for a love of the craft and for a love of the actual job and the profession, you know, I find that can be a hindrance as well. And also, I find that a hindrance to effective acting can also be when there's unresolved obstacles and issues that are trying to be dealt with by the actor by playing characters. I find that's probably one of the biggest ones, where they're trying to use the technique of acting to sort out their stuff. And they may or may not be really adept at acting, but there's a real problem with doing that. And it happens in all different kinds of forms and different degrees. But yeah.
Thank you. Yes, humanity rather than autobiography. Yes, absolutely. Then thank you. That is very thought-provoking. Thank you. Fiona.
Such a big question. And I keep coming back to this idea of the effective actor versus effective acting. And to me, you know, in a way, the effective acting is how the acting impacts, as Alan pointed out, the audience. You know, the audience's experience is felt through effective acting. And that might be through an actor who is not being effective within their own life necessarily as an actor. And I think that, you know, for a sustainable career, I think that the two definitely need to go together and need to be addressed for a sort of a healthy, thriving actor to continually be able to effectively act. But I think they are kind of separate things in a way, and I think that for a period of time, an ineffective actor, if you like, can have effective acting techniques that work, but they may not be sustainable for themselves over a long period of time, sort of pertaining to what Susie's saying, that is, you know, something that sort of feeds their soul, if you like, and I'm just going to put the S word out there, but, you know, feeds their creative soul and their creative spirit, and nurtures that, and that really comes from that sort of deep, fulfilling experience, that creative experience that you have as an actor when acting is the thing that you're really passionate about doing. And so all of those other things that can sort of distract you and draw you away from that, and or create unhealthy habits, because if, as Susie says, you try to sort of deal with things that are going on in your personal life through your acting, then you get into perhaps some of the habits of you know, self-medicating or avoidance issues and things like that. So I think we all acknowledge fully that one of the most difficult things and challenging and beautiful and rich things about an actor is that it happens within our body. And as Mark said, it's an embodied experience. You know, for a lawyer, we might have a crap case and feel crap about that for a week, but the case belongs outside of ourselves. When we have a crap experience as an actor, it happens inside of ourselves, where we hold our memories and our feelings and our emotions, and our thoughts. And it's very hard, again, coming back to that boundary, to sort of find which cell belongs to the artist and which cell belongs to the person, and how do I sort of navigate that within the same bodily form that I live in. And I think that's probably one of the most subtly tricky things that actors have to deal with all the time. And one thing that I've found really helpful for myself, and Alan, you probably know all about this, I can't say to know lots about it, but working with sort of slightly compartmentalizing ourselves in that sort of family systems way, where we have these different parts of ourselves, that, you know, we can bring the committee to the table, so to speak, and our artist is one of those things. And I've found that really helpful with especially young actors coming into their first year of a degree, where we can sit down and sort of unpack our inner critics, if you like, or our judges. And really, we sometimes do improvisations around what the critic and the judge looks like. And then it gives us a language to say, okay, we're going to do this exercise. I invite your artist to come out and play freely. It's a safe space. Let's all ask our critics to go out and have a cup of coffee together outside the room. We can all play freely together, and then maybe we'll bring them in a little bit later to kind of give us a bit of, you know, assessment or analytical work around that. So whilst I would never want to do any, you know, untrained therapeutic practices, so to speak, and I'm very much against, or, you know, very much aware of how some of those things can be incredibly damaging, but I do find that when I get back to the main thing, helping actors with their performance or with their acting is in really, actually, I'm just going to stop there. I think I've probably said enough. I think what I meant to say, I've already said, so I'm not going to try and wrap that up.
We shall leave it unwrapped and yet still fascinating. Thank you, Alan.
Yes, thank you. Fiona, what you were just saying. I just want to acknowledge the point that Susie made about humanity, moving towards humanity, which creates the authenticity, which I think is it's beautiful. That's where I live as well. Being authentic we had this discussion before, Susie and I just want to acknowledge that I've taken that on board and have since started using the word genuine rather than authentic. But even that doesn't do anything, but the humanity I like. And what you were saying, Susie, I just wanted to add on to that. And just to reiterate the question, what helps a person work as an effective actor. It's and it's what I do. It's about emotion. It's an emotional vocabulary. It's an emotional literacy that I don't believe actors are actually taught. I mean, what you're doing, Fiona, with your students there, it sounds like that is the beginning of, or the start of emotional literacy, understanding what's happening within us when we act, and having those parts. And it's not just the self-critic. It's that non-judgmental self. It's what parts of us are strong, or have the strength, are the resilience team. Understanding those parts, and not just up here, but the whole body, the whole system, and cluing into that. And that leads to boundaries, and that resilience team creates the boundary. And then you can move into character and do the same thing there with those parts. Characters, our job is, I say "our" because I still feel like I'm an actor. It's like an alcoholic, it never goes away. So I guess I could say I'm a recovering actor. So as actors, we want our characters to be human, and humanity. There are parts that exist in the character, and there are in this 21st century. Now that we understand trauma a lot more than we did in the 20th century, we can approach the work trauma informed, and that is a whole that requires tools and understand, and for all educators to understand, and directors to understand that. I'm scaling back because I don't want to move into it's a whole different conversation. But to come back to what helps the person as an effective actor in performance, I've said most of them. It's resilience, it's boundaries, it's the non-judgment of self, and the characters being portrayed. It's the courage, which comes from the resilience, the confidence also from the resilience. It's the empathy and the imaginative empathy. It's the humanity. Yeah, it's all those things that make an actor effective. And yeah, I think I'll leave it there.
Can I just add one thing to that, Simon?
Yes.
Just adding on to what you're saying, Alan, the sort of thing that I see with the acting is the tools and the techniques. And as Chekhov talks about building this muscularity of the imagination, which is one of the biggest sort of resiliences that we can do as actors, when we can, fully invest in what we envisage as our make-believe world in the play and our make-believe character, and really build the strength of the connection there. And then, develop a suite of tools and techniques and practice that a lot. That is actually what holds the space for the sort of more intuitive and inspirational, receiving, giving energy to come from the actor, where they can then necessarily respond in the situation, in the moment, and be sort of free to play as an actor, if you like. But all of those techniques, and I guess in that rehearsal space, that is the space to practice all of that, so that we've got that structure and framework around us to be able to then play as best we can in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much to all of you, and setting up that framework. So what gets in the way of those wonderful things you were just elaborating on. What gets in the way? Let's go reverse order. Alan.
It's the boundaries, the blurring, a desire to want to, for the actor to want to lose themselves in the role. I'm going to put, I'm staring straight at myself and I don't like looking at myself, especially when I'm talking. Because it feels like I'm rehearsing for something, and this is the thing, man. This is it. I ain't rehearsing. Um, what gets in the way as well? So there's to go. If you look at the actor, it's what I've been understanding based on my conversations with academics, teachers, instructors, and more so, I guess, in my work, I see it. I don't really focus on it, but anyway, it's about low self-esteem for the actor, and it's about not respecting their own well-being, and the others that they're in contact with during the work and the prep. So here's something. Here's a short story. What I mean by that is there was an actor that I worked with a few years ago, who was into the method. And what he did is he brought the character's life into his own life. And he had this casual relationship with this woman. But in the character, the story of the character was that he had this romantic relationship with this woman. So he just did it. He decided he was going to change this casual nature of the relationship that he was having with this woman outside of play, in his own life. And she was always desired him. So he thought, why not? I'm going to do this because the character's this, and so I'm going to just merge the two and see what that's like. Totally messed up the relationship. So that desire to want to be somebody else or experience something at the cost of your own relationships, that gets in the way. A distorted view of success gets in the way. That the idea of suffering for your art is good, and you'll win respect of your peers, and you'll get rewards, and directors will keep hiring you because you're digging deep and you're throwing up on the stage or whatever, emotionally. So that's, I think, one of the bigger, I feel, bigger obstacles that gets in the way. What gets in the way is, and it starts with this idea of that we don't truly respect ourselves or understand what it means to take care of ourselves. And that's a big piece. So I'll leave that open for everyone else if they care to touch on it.
Thank you. Fiona.
Yeah, so interesting. I think there's so many myths that so many stories we tell ourselves about actors, and the starving in a garrison artist, like all these wonderful characters that we create about artists all out there. And so true. Look, I think one of the things that Susie mentioned as well is, when an actor feels really trapped and they're not free in their acting. And in my experience, when actors feel trapped, it's that they're doing the same thing over and over again, and they can't kind of break out of those habits or those character types they tend to go towards. And I think, again, this relates to what Alan's saying a little bit, is, for all of us, as I said, everything we have within our side, our body and our emotions. Are very hard to distinguish one from the other. But sometimes if we are not unpacking and offloading and looking after ourselves in that way, then we can get stuck in the things that we do in our lives, but also in our acting. And when that happens, for a creative artist, it's almost intolerable. And we've probably all experienced it at times, where it's like, why do I always do that thing with my hand when I'm angry or whatever, And I think what Susie said in her actor training, and I can relate to as well, it's like watching all the time for that actor when they suddenly find a spark, a little way where that spark comes out. It's like fan it, fan it, fan it, and let that person grow and grow and grow until they start to understand who this artist is within them and who that creative person is, and then just keep kind of fanning it and then fan it in that direction, fanning, and then they start to sort of build confidence in who that person is and who that artist is. And I think I've seen it with students, even if it's a tiny little flutter and then maybe it goes out again and then you try and find it, and it often comes up in the most unusual of places where you didn't expect it to happen, through an exercise or mask work or something, where you suddenly go, oh, there they are, bam, 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 come on, let's come out to play. And really encouraging that is so helpful for them. And then again, it's like building those tools and that framework around them to allow that person to play as much as possible, is super, super helpful. But I just wanted to say one other thing as well, and that sometimes the things that hinder us the most can also be our superpowers. So for instance, in say neurodivergent artists like myself, if we, for the ADHDers amongst us, and let's face it, there are a high percentage of ADHDers amongst artists, we are super sensitive to the feedback we're getting in real time from audiences, from people in the room, from other students, from whatever, and incredibly absorbent. As a performer, that's an amazing trait in the world, to be absorbent, and you have great empathy and sensitivity. Unfortunately, it can be really hard to sort of not be out, sort of excarnated, if you like, or constantly reading that, which then can make you not feel as grounded in your own process of discovery within your character, or you sort of can be a little bit off center, if you like. And so I think whatever the thing that might be a hindrance to you can also be a help, as long as you have built up a really solid foundation within yourself as an artist. Then you can start to sort of really understand what a gift that actually is, and be able to sort of ride the wild horses a little bit more, if you like.
Great, thank you. That's yes, that's true. I love the ride the wild horses image. That's fantastic. Susie, what gets in the way?
Yeah. Before we go into what gets in the way, can I just have a bit of a joyful love moment? Is that all right?
Of course.
What Fiona just said, and I just want to take that moment where the little tiny flame, when you see that in an actor or a student, and you fan it like crazy, and you're fanning it. I just really want to just have that moment, because it's like that, isn't it? And part of our jobs and our expertise is to keep a lookout for the little spark. And then you get out, and you have to figure out, do I need a blanket to fan this, or do I need like a little fan? Do I need a little paper, or or what kind of flame? And I just think that that's just such a magnificent and so profoundly accurate way of describing it. So I just want to have that first. Okay. The second thing, so what gets in the way? I'm doing a case study, or a couple of case studies at the moment, and I'm working with Alan on what is the actor and potentially what is their ecosystem, which is for a later time. And coming up against, so I talked to some actors, and one of the questions I asked them, there were two well-known actors, and I said, have you ever been in a codependent relationship with a character? And if so, what happened? And and I have the privilege and the blessing that both of them came back. One of them said they'd never been in a codependent relationship with a character, but they had experienced what I think Alan, you spoke about before, was having feelings for someone that was a character, but then transferring those feelings into real life, and then starting to act as the character in relationship, off stage, out of the play, the way the character would. So developing feelings. And this actor was so magnificent. He's going, I didn't even like, he had a crush on this woman, and it was in Anton Chekhov's The Seagull. And he said, I didn't even like her. And I was like, he goes, and he said that he was having feelings, experiencing feelings of jealousy. He wanted to actually fight the other actor, and he was absorbing and observing at the same time what was going on. The other actor responded to what I'd said, do you have codependent relationships or have you ever? She said, all the time, all the time. And the experience that this particular actor had leads me to say, I believe that codependency with characters and fostering those relationships. So some actors, and I've done it, which led me to being very ill and also led me to a master's and a PhD. So yay, great, because now I can speak to it. Having relationships with these characters where it becomes, if I don't have you and I don't identify through this being and being an actor, and I can speak to some of Mark's work is about this and about untangling that enmeshment of identities and codependency. If we get into that sort of situation and codependency with not only the identity of the actor, like who am I as an actor, and I think the actors' wellbeing study sort of kind of touched into that as well. And I keep getting enmeshed with this character and become codependent, that can get in the way. The other thing is not taking acting, and this is a little bit of a, I would say a little bit of a burr in my foot, is not taking acting and the practice of acting seriously enough.
Mm.
And then taking it way too seriously. So we've got to find the intermediary. I feel like the silence around, and I think Fiona spoke to this before as well, is the mythology of acting. Like acting is a job, it's a craft, it's a practice. There are things that we do as actors, but there's also this very big sort of idea that actors have all of these special sort of magical sorts of things, and it's a rite of passage and all this kind of stuff. When in actual fact, it's probably not that. And there's much more to it. But yet I still find that having a discussion about what it is that we do when we act, like all the messy, dirty bits, is quite censored. So I feel that that can get in the way of effective acting and being an effective actor. So a lot of the injuries that happen to actors, I find when they're playing characters, are psychological injuries, and they happen right in the moment where there's some sort of rupture between the personal self and that character. And it can basically create post-traumatic stress, which is so great. And the other thing I found, it can actually create in the personal life post-traumatic stress. And if you do it repeatedly, then you've got those two things going on. So if we don't take acting seriously enough and have these conversations, and they're hard conversations, and it takes people to research and to be able to find ways of being able to speak about that, then it's just going to get that sort of silence and that sort of censorship and the inability to have those conversations through lack of knowledge or spaces, whatever it is that stops them, then it's going to be a hindrance to everything. So that's the other thing. I think that's probably it for that. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, you go.
I was
No,
just
you
going
go.
to agree with you on the processing, and that yes, processing is something that is missed in acting. The actors need a space to process those dirty bits, as you said, the messy bits. It's not necessarily a therapy. It's not necessarily therapy either.
No, not at all. It's a place where we can talk about what it is that happens to us. Like, so a place where, and I'll put myself in the experience, where I can actually go, do you know what? I was playing this character, and halfway through the journey tonight, if I'm on a stage, in a stage play, the character actually said something to me. Now, that's a very real experience. I have that happen to me all the time. Michael Chekhov had that. You know, consequently, he received a lot of death threats and so forth, longer conversation. But it happens to actors. We hear voices, and they're imaginary voices, and we do, a lot of us, and I think Fiona spoke to this before, is we do straddle the very fine line between mental stability and mental unwellness. And this is the extraordinary value of a panel like this. Yeah. Because if I was to go out and say, oh, I hear voices, and nobody knew that I was an actor and I was right in the middle of this process and I was doing, 50 takes a day playing a psychopath, then, I'm going to be perceived in a particular way. But the fact is, I'm an actor and I'm playing a psychopath, and I've just killed 50, trigger warning, just killed 50 people or whatever, and I'm hearing voices. So I need to be able to speak to people who understand that and go, yeah, wow.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
maybe teach,
Totally.
maybe teach me things, or, so that, I hear you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's lonely being an actor, all those voices in your head, it's just really, you got all those voices and there's only one person. And anyway.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that I don't think there's any sort of grief that I've ever felt when I've said goodbye to a character. And interestingly, one of the actors that I did an interview with said that they were so in love with the character and had bonded so deeply with them. And admittedly, there was boundary blurring, which is Maria Pinero's term for when an actor actually blurs boundaries with the character, so their identities mesh. She said that she went through a horrific mourning period, and she still remembers it today. So how do you explain to someone, or how do you share that with someone? Hi, I'm grieving the loss of somebody who doesn't exist. But to me, it was very real. Audible. Yeah. So
that goes back to the thing as I was talking about parts when we talk about characters and looking at those. Yeah, it's very real because you did bring those parts to life. And if you can't find a space for them in your real life, then yeah, it's time to lay it to rest until the next time. Put it on a shelf. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're dead, but they're gone for a while.
yeah,
Anyway,
I think
that's
that
kind of,
I think part of it is also that we ask the artist in ourselves to be open to all the range of emotions and to be receptive to the vulnerability of playing this character, and to have our radar out, and and yet then we expect that artist to just drop that thing and walk away. It's not really fair. We wouldn't ask anybody to do that, actually. So yeah, I think it's back to that embodied experience. We are feeling our character within our body. And so then when we extract that character from our body, there sort of needs to be processes around that, I think, that really help help us to sort of understand it or unpack it for ourselves, I think, and not be too hard, and understand what students might also be going through if we're teachers. It's interesting because I did also experience that when I was very young with a character, and I hadn't been given any formal training to get in and out of a character in a healthy way, and I was in a very dark character. She was a commander of Auschwitz women's camp, and she happened to also look very much like me, strangely. So there was kind of this weird thing that went on, and I had no idea what was going on, but it really, really impacted me in my life, in my relationship. I wasn't sort of functioning so well. And when somebody mentioned that to me, luckily kind of clocked it and then helped me to understand and have some processes around that. But I think it's funny because when I became a puppeteer, there was sort of a sense of me of going, oh, thank goodness the character is outside of myself. I can love it and perform it and do all those wonderful things, but at least it's not in my body any longer. And so found perhaps some distance between me and that experience, and it was, I wouldn't say it's specifically because of that, but I certainly can absolutely grieve leaving the puppet behind, but that's a little bit more tangible than leaving a character behind because it's outside our bodies. So
if I could add something here, Yeah, just because I'm aware from the actor wellbeing research we did through the University of Sydney, that what was often recognised not only the grief of having to say goodbye to the character, but you're also the grief of goodbye to the relationships with the other performers.
Yeah.
Because so much of the acting profession is you get a job, you might be fortunate to work with a cast for 6, 8, 12 weeks maybe, unless you're in perhaps a musical, then you get to be with them for years, or a film, you might only be there for half a day. Whatever the investment of you bringing the character, bringing yourself as a professional into these relationships is something that there is often not the reflection, self-preparation to prepare to acknowledge the grief of the loss of not necessarily bad things, the loss of good things, the loss of really touching, life-changing experiences with your fellow actors and maybe with the crew, if it's a film, or the stage manager and the production team. So there is that kind of often unreflected space to process grieving, and maybe that is also something that could be fostered in a productive way within production companies to acknowledge we're leaving, we're moving on. So that may be another point. I'll hand back to you, Simon, and just I know we've got one question already in the chat, but I invite others to bring questions into the chat, and then I'll feed those through to Simon at some point. Over to you, Simon.
Great. Yeah, yes, thank you. And thank you all so much for that incredibly rich conversation, and getting in and out of characters safely, getting in and out of performances safely, bringing parts to life. How do you manage all that and run it? There's a lot of talk recently, or when I say recently, over the last 5 years, of links to sort of actors as athletes, and that we should, athletes, we should be treated like that, because athletes work hard, they stretch and they warm up and then they do a thing, and then they don't just finish running the 200 meters at the Olympics. They then go and they stretch and they have a physio and all that kind of stuff. And Federer's match goes for 2 hours, but his physio goes for an hour afterwards. And what is the acting equivalent of that? And the problem is, as you've all articulated, is that it's not just, the physical stuff. There's quite a lot of decent physios. We have one as the president here of ASPA, for instance. But also, what is the psychological and emotional physiotherapy that that is both from an individual point of view, from the company point of view, from production point of view, that might happen in the moment, it might happen after a performance, it might happen weeks after, years after. And that is definitely something which is a growing area of interest, and it's probably another panel, I think. And I think it touches maybe perhaps into Jeff's question as well. Okay, moving on. Thank you so much. This is very, very excellent. My mind is fizzing and bubbling as well. So how or why? We've mentioned a few different methods, a few different models. We've mentioned the method. We've mentioned Chekhov. We've mentioned some Richard Schwartz part talk. We've mentioned Stanislavski. We've mentioned quite a few different sorts. How or why might an acting technique be potentially unhealthy or have potentially unhealthy side effects for performance, for actors? Susie. Oh, Fiona. Her hand up was, I saw the hand of, quick there. Look at that. Fiona.
Well, I think if we look at acting historically, if we take it right back to the beginning of, cultural ritual performances, that performance was done by the spiritual leaders or people within the community, and it was absolutely enmeshed in this sort of respect of the spiritual element to performance. I think when, I'm not going to, you guys will all know the history of theatre, of course, but when we get to modern theatre, and when there was a lot of exploration around the, this sort of idea of psychoanalysis and the workings of the mind and the individual of the actor, and let's get inside the mind and the heart of the actor and all that, then I think that's where those lines really became blurred around, therapeutic techniques and acting. And I think from that, what happened was that some of those therapeutic techniques became acting techniques, but then were being taught by people who weren't therapists and didn't have the training for it. And so therefore there were all these sort of therapeutic techniques that are being kind of thrown around by actor trainers for actors who may or may not suddenly have then a very traumatic experience without having any safe space to process that. And I think those blurred lines is where, whenever an actor training is taking on a sort of therapeutic technique without really understanding where it's come from, what it is, and the actor trainer has not really unpacked that and thought about that deeply and the potential impacts and risks that might have on trainers. So I'm not going to specifically mention a technique. The obvious one would be method. Lee Strasberg's take, extracting of one of Stanislavski's many, many, many wonderful tools. But also, I think when we have that blurring without a conscious awareness of that, that's when we get into trouble, is my understanding and experience, or one of the issues.
Great, thank you. Yes, Susie.
Okay. Yes, I'm going to speak to Fiona and just agree 100 billion, million, trillion%. The second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go against the grain and mention a technique. I'm going to mention Ivana Chubbuck. Yes, I am. I know. I feel a bit outrageous. I'm being provocative. So when I was doing one of the degrees, I can't remember what it's irrelevant, but I came across Ivana Chubbuck technique, and I had already investigated method, and I was a method actor, and then found Stanislavski and Cherny. So that's the journey. And I remember having a young actor that I'd been coaching when I was in Sydney come to me and go, and he sat down right next to me and he said, I've just done Chubbuck technique. And I went, oh, okay. And I'd already heard little sort of murmurings about it, but I'm one of those people who, if I don't research it and I don't test it, then I don't believe it. Okay, now that's recorded. Okay, that's it. So he said it was fantastic, but he will never do it again because he was injured by it. So he was traumatized by it. So during one of my degrees, I went and looked at Chubbuck technique, and I spoke to a few practitioners that I respect, and they had, some good things to say about it. So I went through Chubbuck's book, and I brought up some quotes. So I just put some quotes. So the things that were really appealing to me were quotes like, the better the actor, so this is Ivana Chubbuck from The Power of the Actor, the better the actor is at accessing his, her, or their life experiences as a way of creating urgency and passion for the goals in the script, the higher the art. Now, I'm not into that, because that's saying, okay, yeah, anyway, I'll leave it there. Chubbuck says the Chubbuck technique grew out of my search to understand and overcome my own personal traumas, particularly how they impacted my acting and my life. So there's a blur there already. So then I went through her book and I made an Excel spreadsheet, and I wrote down all the actors that she said she'd worked with. And I thought, okay, well, are these film and TV actors and stage actors, or is it a mix of all of them? And most of the actors that Chubbuck had worked with are all film, TV actors. So to me, that then said that Chubbuck's technique wasn't sustainable. Particularly, there's a tool in Chubbuck technique, which is kind of a bit of a version, a dangerous version to me, and I'll just say that, of effective memory. So Stanislavski's emotional memory of effective memory, called substitution. And you substitute in a particular lived experience, emotional, and it has to be traumatic, it has to be fresh. And then you put that on top of the character, and then you play that. And you can only use them, and Chubbuck says you can only use them until they don't have any more emotional charge. And then you have to find another one. All right. So that's just not sustainable. So I found that Chubbuck was talking about basically talking basically to film and TV. So I think other practices, it's always about, to me, coming back to the self-orientation in a story. Like, are you orientating, is the actor orientating themselves in relationship with the character? Are they setting boundaries, or are they creating a place where they can really render and forge that relationship with the character from the moment that they read that text? So Michael Chekhov says the moment that the actor reads and comes into contact with the text, transformation has begun. Yep. So we already start to transform. Is being attentive to that and noticing whenever, whatever tools and techniques I'm using, when I'm getting lost in that. I think too, I've lost a little bit of my train of thought. Simon, can you just bring me back to what the question is? I got all caught up in Chubbuck.
That's right. When you're getting, well, you sort of are linking back when you said in a technique, but then you're getting lost in that. And we're talking about how or why an acting technique might be potentially unhealthy. So
Okay.
yeah. So
Okay.
I think yeah.
Yeah. So I think too, acting tech, when you use too many tools, that can also be quite unhealthy. So you're grasping at all these things, and you're trying to put them at once, and you're really trying to get at this character, and you can literally short circuit and paralyze yourself. So I think using too many techniques can also be unhealthy. I think too, one thing that might be a bit provocative to say is that I'm not really into guru worship in techniques, and there are those acting techniques that have gurus attached to them, and that you go and you study with a particular person who has that status endowed on them, and it's always endowed on them by whoever's in the room and them themselves, and that's fine if you're into that, but it's also dangerous. And it's no longer about the technique, because the technique could be really fantastic and it could work, it could be amazing. But if there's an ideology surrounding that technique, and you have to put yourself in certain situations or compromise who it is and your integrity and your artistry in order to be able to be in relationship with that technique, that's a problem. That's a big problem, and that's dangerous, just full stop. And that stuff does exist. Yeah. So that's all I've got.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's great, Alan.
It's already been touched on, and I'll touch on it again, and that is the trauma and how what the in theater schools and drama schools, stories that I've heard and I've read about the some of the better performances were informed by trauma. And it may have been the idea of using effective memory. And it may be that the teacher wasn't teaching effective memory, but at the end of the day, the student feels the pressure to perform, to do something. I mean, again, it's out of that desire to want to be respected. So they do draw on their own personal lives, and because they don't have the tools to maneuver their way through that or navigate to the healthy side, the other side of it, they suffer. Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is trauma. A lot of students, actors out there too, outside of school, are impacted by it. And if they're not seeking assistance to deal with that in however way they want to deal with it, it might be just meditation, yoga, it could be therapy, self-help books. I was a big fan of self-help books when I was younger. Learned a lot that way. But yeah, I'm probably just spinning wheels here, but it is about trauma. It's about that's what gets in the way of a lot of acting techniques. is the lack of understanding of how to deal with that. So we come back to this trauma-informed approach, which is different for different instructors. Yeah, I think I will probably leave it at that.
Can I just
Okay.
also,
Yes, Fiona.
sorry, I was just going to say that, back to this idea of effective acting, and I think it should be at the heart of every teacher, regardless of what method they're teaching, is that, the purpose is to create actors that are able to produce effective acting. But if that goal to produce effective acting comes at the expense of the actor, then I think that's where the method suddenly becomes unhealthy as a method for that particular actor. It might be healthy for the next one, but I think it is very individual and it's not a one size fits all. And I think we need actor trainers or teachers that are really astutely aware of the potential risks of any method, but more to the point, are really listening and watching and observing the impact that goal of effective acting is having on that particular actor in that moment. And just like both Alan and Susie were saying, where in the room do we have space to stop and just talk about that and talk about what the language of that is? What's happening here? And I know that we can't always stop and stop the flow of a class, but I think that if something like this happens, the more literacy we have around it, the better. The better we can all navigate any of these processes. A lot of them have phenomenal gifts, and I truly believe that all of them are created with the best intentions, but they come with risks, and some of them with a lot more risks. And I think that when teachers are not aware of those, that's when we've got problems. So
Yes, thank you so much. Scribbling away. Lots there. And I'm just aware of time. So we've hit the moment where, and I realize we have a couple of questions left. However, Mark, questions from participants, if anyone has any of our lovely participants.
Yes, so we have one which I think we're starting to touch on, and it's not surprising. How do you get in and out of character in a healthy way? So, and as Fiona's already kind of signaled ahead for us, there'll be different ways for different contexts, but it would be great, I'm sure, to hear what each of the panelists has, and if there's time, I'll say a few words too.
Absolutely. What's your back of a matchbox answer to in and out of character in a healthy way?
the teacher. Oh, sorry, you go, Alan.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say the one that the teacher who sort of, when I was spiraling, caught me was the 10 steps in, 10 steps out. So when you're going towards the character, take 10 steps into that character. Then when you're releasing the character at the end of the performance, take 10 steps consciously out and sort of, just bring back a sense of your own self. That was when I was very, very young. Chekhov has a similar approach whereby you are imaginatively creating this character outside of yourself. Imagine them stepping, sort of very, very vividly imagine them before you, and then you step into that character and mesh with that character, then you step back out. So it's sort of similar processes, but where we're making this distinction between the character there, the character self here, and then this period of time where the two of us are in relationship with each other within my body, and then when we separate back out again.
Alan.
Yeah, I agree with you that the physical separation is really important as well. What I tend to do is the actor needs to know who they are before they step into another. So kind of do an inventory, and it's about just where are they at in their own lives right now, what's going on for them, theme, if they come up with a theme for themselves, if they come up for a theme with the character, for the character, two different distinct spaces, ways of thinking, So that's how I get the actor to create that boundary. It's not just a physical. It's emotional. Yeah, it's everything. So you get a whole package. So it seems to be more effective, more powerful that way.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Susie.
Uh, uh, some little practical things. So one thing I wanted to just acknowledge, just so I can give myself or give the people here and the panel a context. Characters don't know that they're not real. They don't know. So one really good way to get in and out of character is to tell your character goodbye. 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 So you know when the end of the take is or the scene is over, if we're working on film or TV, or when the curtain comes down. That's goodbye. So being able to say goodbye and their name and say hello and my name. So goodbye, Marsha. Hello, Susie. And then I do a series of so I've borrowed them from lots and lots and lots of years of being in and out of therapy. So I always work with therapists and counselors and stuff when I'm working on roles, and it's a blessing and a privilege and a necessity, in practice sometimes. So I just borrow and I just do finger tapping and I say my name 10 times over and over. And then I do brushing and I get actors. One of my favorite things to do with actors is get them to recite the alphabet backwards. And it's just simply deactivating and activating. So just honoring, I'm plugging in. So I plugged into my character. It doesn't know it's not real. Now I'm going to unplug it. And a really cool way, and this is going off the back of Rhonda Blair's magical work when she was saying if acting is rewiring of the brain, and cognitive studies have actually proved that, we literally create neural pathways when we act, right? And there's a whole panel on that, we need to deactivate it. We need to reprogram back the other way. And I find that when I get actors to say the alphabet backwards, the effort that they go to actually say the alphabet backwards, and they get into their body and they're like, and then they start laughing. And all of a sudden they start to come back to who they are in the room as actors. And that character doesn't exist anymore. Because also that character doesn't say the alphabet backwards in the story. So we're doing something that's task orientated on that actor in this present moment, not in the world of the play or the film or the scene. So just some little things like that. Lots of shaking, but just getting it out and resetting and getting off the energy and so forth. So it's very, as all of the panelists have said, everybody in this space at the moment, it's in the body and deactivating the body, and also honoring that the body is inside the mind. It's not just the brain. So we need to unplug and plug back in. And it's a case of shifting identities. So I'm going into this and then I'm going into that and then going into this. Yeah. But they're just some little ways that work, that I know that work. Yeah.
Thank you.
There's something that I just want to add to that as you were talking. I got this idea from Sarah Lovett, who created a contract for the character.
So cool.
Or actually, yeah. So and I adapted it, and I told her I'm stealing this. And it's an agreement that as the actor, this is what I'm going to be doing, and at the end of it, I'm going to lay this to the side. It's contractual. It's got a stamp, and then I have the actor sign it. And that alone is like, wow, that feels really important. So I owe it to myself to leave this character behind when I'm done.
I love that.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. Mark.
Yeah. All the above, and I guess a part of the question I'd focus on is recognizing, like you were saying, Simon, it's a bit like the athlete. There's a need for warming up and then a cooling down. So I see that this question of taking on or becoming or shaping character, different language we might use around it, that shaping into and embracing, and then being able to release, let go of in the physical ways, And what I think is valuable about thinking of it as a kind of warm up and cool down is a bit what Susie was saying about the neuroscience, the pathways of the brain. If our bodies are used to the factor of warming up to embody character and then cooling down to release character, that makes life a lot easier. And I know that from my own practice working with actors. And I give them a hand dance as one way of shaking it out. That becomes another ritual that reminds them, this is me doing this. This is not the character. So that's another thing that
To be honest, just within the culture of acting, certainly in the theatre, you know, there's always pressure when you finish the show to get changed really quickly and rush out and get into the foyer to meet all the people and the da-da-da-da-da. And like there's not really this time to go, hang on a second, when do I do that thing to get out of my character? So I don't know if that's ever going to change, but maybe you just have to, in the contract, say, when I get home, I'm going to do the blah, blah, because we've got a party to have before I get home, or, you know, people to meet.
Or what I figured out, because I get what you're talking about. So I started wearing particular things. So I would take off. So I'd figure out for the character, what is the thing that activates that character? So often for me, it's shoes. So the moment the shoes are on, I'm done. I can't. I'm going. I'm in that journey. So I take the shoes off. But then if I put my shoes on, so I might not have time to do all my things. I'll be tapping though, and I'll be saying my name over because I can do that while I'm moving. Yep. But then the moment I put my shoes on, because I know that shoes are active for me, then I'm in my shoes.
That's nice.
Yeah, so we can do it just like that, because actors, like, we wear costumes, and it just makes perfect sense, doesn't it, that we would translate that into our daily lives, into our own personal selves. And yeah, then nobody also knows either. You just go, okay, I'm just going to put that on, or I need to put my red lipstick on, or I need to put my ring on, or whatever it is. But I think, Fiona, isn't it? It's about consciousness. Like going, I consciously am doing this because this is the effect it has, and this is what I need to do to turn off and become myself again. And that doesn't need to be shared with anyone.
Yeah.
Just needs to be embodied as a ritual. So developing a ritual like that, maybe.
Exactly.
Alan, anything about when you don't have a lot of time at the end of a show, what to do, how to bring that de-rolling or stepping out?
Yeah, go to the bar and drink. No, I'm only joking.
Yes.
I'm only joking.
Finally, someone said it.
I think I would agree with what Susie is just saying. It's something really quick like that, grabbing an object, something just to ground you on your way out. And I mean, there may be other lingerings that happen, and you can deal with those later. But for the immediate, if you just got to go out and meet your family or whatever, or go to the pub and have a casual drink, then yeah, some different set of shoes.
Wash the character out of me through the drink. I'm flushing the character as I drink.
Do you know what? I used to. I don't drink at all, right? But I could notice that, and I got into lots of trouble doing exactly that, right? But everyone does it. Like it's kind of like a thing. And I was like, no. So I got into coconut water. So I'd have a can, right? And I wouldn't say anything to anybody, and all I do was just go ring pull, and you know how it goes, and I just scull the can. And then I'd slam it down. I'd go, yeah.
Yeah.
That's
just an idea.
I'm so glad you added the coconut into that.
Oh.
I was like, you did what?
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Well, look, thank you. And perhaps it's ways to step in and step out of a character. The practical workbook for actors, probably got all the authors here, so that can be the next project. And perhaps it's the thing where when you have, 10 seconds, when you have, because in some contracts, you have to, particularly if you're doing stuff with children's theatre or families, you have to go out the front and meet the people after the
Straight
matinee.
away. Yeah.
Or you're going from set to an opening and you are in the car putting on your posh frock or whatever. And so different things for different scenarios, for different pieces. But coming back to what you all mentioned in your first responses was, what is the foundation upon which you as an actor are basing your work? And how you strengthening in your humanity in that? As opposed to, here's a whole stack of techniques, like a massive spice rack, but you can't make cheese on toast and use every single spice in the rack. So it's a whole world of interest and intrigue. I have loved every minute of it. We are out of time. Thank you to our panel. Thank you to Fiona. Thank you so much. Thank you to Alan. Thank you to Dr. Susie. Thank you to Dr. Mark. Thank you so much to ASPA for having us. Any questions that you have for our panel, please send them through and we will pass them on. I'm sure they'll be more than delighted to continue conversations that have bubbled up now and that will bubble up tonight, tomorrow, 3 o'clock in the morning. They are available 3 o'clock in the morning to answer your questions. That's in the contract.
For actors.
Simon, can I just share, of course, the next one?
Our next one.
Our final one. Very sad, but in a month's time, we'll be exploring research into actor health and well-being. So bringing actor health and well-being under the spotlight. And that will be on Saturday, the 22nd of March, 6 p.m. AEDT time. So that's daylight saving here in Sydney and in Melbourne. And we hope many of you may be able to again join us for this, the final of this series of 5 webinars on different aspects of actor health and well-being. Back to you, Simon.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us all. Thank you for all of your ongoing work and being leaders in this field where there is a lot of interest and a lot of work, which is both encouraging and also a little bit dicey because of some enthusiastic yet sometimes misguided voices as well. So thank you so much for your care and your resilience and your courage in being voices for care for actors and performers and in the industry. Thank you very much, folks. It's nice to see you all. Have a nice rest of day. And if you're driving home, make sure you have a car. We'll see you on the 22nd of March. Goodbye.
Thanks so much, Simon. Thanks, Mark.